The following program is available in high definition on Channel 700. This program is designed and produced by the community with the support of TV Cogeco.
Welcome to this episode of Council Matters. We're going to talk about the Town of Oakville's private tree protection bylaw, which we're reviewing now at the Town of Oakville. After more than 5 years of operation, it's time to check and see how it's working and how it can be improved with any changes that are needed. And joining me for this discussion are Shaniah Leduc, the Vice President of the 14 Mile Creek Residents Association, Janet Haslett-Theall, the President of Joshua Creek Residents Association, and Karen Brock, who leads Oakvillegreen. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. You know, Karen, Oakvillegreen had a prominent part in creating the private tree protection bylaw, and you, I think, well remember the controversy that attended its introduction. How do you and your organization feel about how it's gone?
I did arrive on the tail end of the implementation of the bylaw, and I do recall that there was some controversy, but I think what the past 5 years has shown us is that it's been a good thing, because now we have some of the facts. The town has been able to track the number of trees that were, when people gave notification for removal. And I think that was probably the biggest lesson that we all learned, that it was 1% of the tree canopy that was removed. So I think just that alone has been a wonderful exercise in getting the facts.
Janet, your time here goes back long enough to remember the fight as well. Did you have any controversy within your part of town over this?
Well, I think there's always people that said, what about the landowners' rights and private property rights? I'm fortunate to live, and our area is very well treed, with the exception of what's going to happen with the emerald ash borer. But we have people who are concerned about, you know, whether or not they have the right to cut down a tree or not when they buy a house. We have a larger number of people who are concerned about the preservation of trees and our forests.
Shaniah, is your association of a view that the tree bylaw needs to be changed, or is the balance between homeowner rights and community rights about right? What's your advice to us?
Well, 14 Mile Creek Residents Association is a fairly newly formed residents association in the last year. It has been in direct response to the Merton Lands study. And in general, the residents would passionately agree that tree protection is a #1 priority for our local area, most definitely, especially over all of the area that the Merton Lands involve. So we commend that the tree bylaw has actually been put in place, and I value personally that you're looking at it to reevaluate it 5 years now and see where it can be improved. There are a couple of suggestions for improvement, but I think it's all forward motion in terms of preserving and protecting something that's very valuable to the town members.
Right, so the proposals that staff have taken out to the public for consultation tighten and make tougher the private tree protection bylaw, in my view. Would you all agree with that assessment, that it's not getting more lenient, it's getting tighter?
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly much tougher.
And do you see that as the right degree of toughness?
Well, I would say that we agree that there needs to be, there needs to be more penalties, there needs to be restrictions. It's finding the balance to make sure that we're not just dealing with the private resident, but we're dealing with the developer. And you know, Joshua Creek spent a fair amount of time talking about the private tree bylaw, because of our passion around why are we clear-cutting some of the bigger properties, such as Clanmore or the defense lands. And we applaud that the private tree bylaw is being reviewed and toughened up. But I think greater energy needs to go into dealing with how do you affect the Municipal Act and the rights that these developers seem to have to clear-cut large numbers of trees.
Right. So,
Agreed.
so the private tree protection bylaw, just so everyone can understand, really doesn't have the ability to touch development applications. But in development applications under the Planning Act, we do have some ways of encouraging people to replace trees that they remove. And we have, in some cases, been able to get better tree coverage than we had before. And we certainly aim to do that. Ultimately, of course, the Planning Act is a provincial act, and the private tree protection bylaw is a municipal bylaw, and it operates outside of the development sphere. We, over the last 5 years, in many residents associations meetings where I've been invited, the questions have always been, they've been very good to be focused on the actual private sector, and they've all been to the point of wanting tougher, tighter, sharper teeth, and more restriction. And I've just been struck by how much opposition. I mean, the town was really divided when we brought this in, and the opposition seems to have just not shown up this time. It's almost like I want to believe that the private tree protection bylaw has proven itself, and that people, people who opposed it may have converted, or else, who knows? But that is it's an unusual development from my perspective, because I remember, it was quite hot. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to ask you what you've heard.
And certainly Oakvillegreen hears from people who are saying, save the trees, save the trees that I'm watching being cut down in my neighbor's backyard. And I think there is some confusion about the difference between what the private tree bylaw regulates and what the development applications, the rights involved in that. So there's some confusion. And the reason that I like the new tree bylaw is because I think it simplifies. People didn't understand what the notification process was and what the permit process was. So going forward, the suggestion just to have the permit process, I think, is great, and the fact that they'll be regulating smaller trees, again, ultimately means protection of the urban forest canopy. So those are a couple of things that Oakvillegreen is really happy to see.
Well, our work on the development side to force more tree planting, to force tree planting to be done with 30 cubic meters of good quality soil, all those standards that we brought in, and our success from time to time in getting more trees at the end than there were in the first place are a key part of reaching the 40% tree canopy target for 2057. But the private tree protection bylaw is the other piece. I was struck, and I'd love to hear your reaction. In the staff presentation, they talked about how in the final year, they started counseling people about replacement and alternatives, and there was 138% replacement, and we instead of having a net loss, it turned around, and I thought a 38% gain was pretty dramatic. And I thought if they'd been doing that for all 5 years, instead of losing 1%, we might have gained 2%. I was astonished by that. Now, they said they want to do more of that and that they might get that number up. How did you react to that?
Well, first of all, I think it's terrific when they can engage in a conversation that educates, not just restricts. That makes the world of difference. When you understand, what planting a native versus a non-native, where the value of that tree, the impact it might have on your neighbor. I mean, that educational focus is good use of the taxpayers' money.
Okay, and. Now, Oakvillegreen, there's a third leg to our efforts in this area. We've asked Oakvillegreen to help with educating people. What's been the response that you've found on that front?
Well, certainly part of the education is tree planting and understanding the value of trees, and certainly not just the beauty of a tree, but the ecological value. So I think when people, and we've been planting trees in collaboration with the town since 2004, so when people get out there and plant a tree and get their hands dirty and then come back 5 years later and say, well, that tree's bigger, but gee, it's not as big as I'd hoped, I think that's when the reality hits that it does take a long time for a tree to grow. And through our education in schools and in the community, I think people are getting it, and that you can't just replace, even if you do have to cut down a tree, you just can't replace it with one tree. And I think that's another value of the new private tree bylaws, having sort of a transparent formula. If you say, okay, well, yes, sure, cut down this tree, but we expect that you need to replace it with, let's say, 7 other trees. So it gets people thinking.
Education and awareness is the #1 factor for affecting change, and I actually applaud that one-on-one approach and would highly encourage it. I know in the staff report there's some concern that will increase the volume of expectation for staff by 200%. And appreciate that we have to manage those balances, but our recommendation or suggestion, maybe I should say, is maybe make it an online process in terms of every tree needing to go through that policy process. But it can be similar to, say, when you have to get your boating license. You actually are forced to go through an education process while you are going through the policy and the permit process. So is there some way that it could maybe be automated or put on a website? So
I like the concept, tree training.
Tree training, exactly.
Good suggestion.
That's a great suggestion. I believe that trees are a key part of Oakville's livability, and I believe that Oakville's livability is the single most important part of our economic development success. And I believe that the good jobs of the future are going to be in the towns where people want to live, where the talented people want to live, and where the kids of those people want to live. So everything Council and I do is really aimed at livability, and the payoff is a strong economy for our town. On Merton, let me just say that I'm very confident that Council will follow my leadership and we will save the entire thing, every bit of it, saw wet, everything.
Excited to hear that.
So
news.
Look forward.
Very excited to hear that. Look forward to Monday.
It's going to be a long process. It'll take well into the summer, and when you're fighting to save land and save trees, we've learned that there are no easy silver bullets. You actually have to work, and it takes time.
Agreed.
But I really appreciate you joining us now on this topic, and in a moment we'll be back with a panel of councillors to take up the discussion of how we're going to deal with the private tree protection bylaw changes, and you're going to see how council matters. We're joined now by 3 members of Oakville Town Council. Councillor Max Kahn, who represents the northeast part of town, what we call Ward 6. Councillor Ralph Robinson, who represents the southwest part, what we call Ward 1, or he calls Brawny at every opportunity, not to be forgotten. And Councillor Allan Elgar, who represents the northwest part of town, what we call Ward 4. And Allan, like me, is also a member of the Council of the Region of Halton. And together, these 2 councils do everything that matters for the daily lives of our citizens. Guys, thank you for being here today. You heard the panel talk about the private tree protection bylaw that we've had operating for more than the last 5 years. And I wanted to canvass you about what you're hearing from your residents about it. You will all remember that it came in with a certain amount of controversy. I've always thought that we're very good about trying to hear both sides of every story. We certainly heard both sides of the story back then. But we've been doing a lot of consulting on the private tree protection bylaw, and so far, I mean, I've been reviewing this with residents associations for coming on 2 years now, and all I hear is they want it tougher and tighter, and they want sharper teeth in it, and they want a slower rate of loss of private trees. What are you hearing, Max?
Actually, it's interesting. There was a lot of controversy the first time this came into play. We enacted it in 2008, October of 2008, and before that, there was that discussion between a balance between property rights and our duty to the environment. I'm not hearing that anymore. I'm hearing what you've just represented, that more and more of our residents are impressed by this bylaw, but they want more stricter provisions encoded in it.
You know, Ralph, your area had a fairly strong representation of the anti. You had very strong pro, but you also had very strong anti. And you took kind of a leadership position that we needed it, and you were a stalwart for it. What are you hearing?
I'm hearing very little now about that issue. You know, we need to go through the process. We said we would, and it's time we did. But to me, Mayor Burton, it's all about bylaws and education. But I would like to tell you that what I really am hearing is that the people are upset about the emerald ash borer tree clear cutting, which is what it's turning into, and the fact that we don't have enough control over our developers. I'm sorry to bring it up. It's not on the agenda here, but that's what I'm hearing.
Well, that's good to know, and certainly we don't have a lot of choice about you know, fighting the emerald ash borer. And
but anyway.
So we're going to have to redouble our efforts in that regard. You know, the funny thing is, for many years now, we've been talking about how we're fighting it and what we have to do, treating the ones that are treatable and getting rid of the ones that are dangerous. And I do find that in fact, this relates to the private tree protection bylaw. I do find that sometimes you don't hear until the people see it happen. It's like they don't. Sometimes consultation. Sometimes every view doesn't show up until the very end.
I was at Sheldon Creek yesterday, and there's 40 trees down there marked with an orange X. You know what that means? Yeah. That's bad.
That means that it's a major infestation of the bug.
But it can be dealt with differently. But I'd love to get into that later.
Okay. Oh, Alan, your area was kind of ground zero of opposition, and you were kind of ground zero of. I mean, you took it on, and you were one of the leaders for it, the private tree protection bylaw. What's your sense of it now?
Well, I think it's probably the best thing we ever did in the town, because now we have baseline data, and after 5 years, we can see that we've still lost 1% of the tree canopy, which is it's still going south. So, and when you start looking at it, you can realize that if you cut down one full-size silver maple tree, you really have to start. We've learned we have to plant between 26 and 34 trees to get the same amount of tree canopy, and it's the old trees that are really being lost, especially in the south part of Oakville, which the residents are waking up and realizing the importance of those trees. Like, we've got 1.9 million trees in Oakville. 45% of them are on the town property, but only 0.5% are bigger than a 30-inch diameter. 95% of the trees are less than 8-inch diameter. So that's where the canopy problem is, and a lot of old trees are being cut. And we have to look at the new bylaw and see what we can do. If people are allowed to cut a tree, what the replacements have to be. So it is very timely. People are concerned. They've learned a lot. Especially the neighbors beside the people that have cut every tree off their property when the development application comes in. And there's a little bit of an issue between the private tree bylaw and the development, because when the developer comes in and puts in the application, the shield of the private tree bylaw is lifted. So we're into a whole different process. So somewhere we have to tie everything together.
Well, up to now, what we've done is tried to make sure that we're promoting tree planting under the development side, and we're promoting tree retention and planting on the private side. I've always thought that if we did both of those enough, they would overlap naturally. What was your takeaway from the staff report where it talked about the last year of achieving replacement instead of, I mean, they were not only achieving replacement, they were getting like 138%. versus the losses of the previous 4 years.
Well, that is really good, but the trouble is we need a 34-to-1 ratio between taking down a full-size tree and replacing with a smaller tree. Like, we're going the right way, I agree, but right now those trees that they're replanting are lollipops, and it's going to take another 20 or 30 years, and we really don't have 20 or 30 years left to resolve our issues, because the trees are the carbon sequestration of the carbon dioxide, and right now there's such a thing called, I don't know if you've ever heard of, called the Keeling curve. It started in 1958 where they're measuring the carbon dioxide levels, and we have passed 400 parts per million now of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and it's never happened in human history. So I know we're a small player, but we can make a change, and like everybody has to wake up to this issue.
So, on the recommendations that are out before the public right now, are you looking for changes to those?
I think the town is doing a great job by getting it out there and waiting to hear what the public wants to do, especially with the replacements. You're absolutely right. And the town is getting, I think the town staff have done a great job of getting this out to the public so they can get the feedback they need.
So, have you heard anything from your residents in terms of things to add to the private tree protection bylaw, or things to tighten? You know, that we're toughening, and the staff told us, in terms of reducing the number of trees you can cut, increasing the size that's protected. Are you comfortable with those numbers? Do you want to see different numbers? Are you okay with them? Where are you at on that?
See, I bring an interesting perspective because I initially voted against the bylaw. I believed that it was frivolous. I thought that people weren't cutting down the trees, and I was wrong about that. The data reveals it. I think that's one of the greatest gains that we have from the bylaw is the data we got. It turns out that over the past 5 years, we've lost 329,000 square meters of tree canopy, and like Councillor Elgar said, that's 1% of our tree canopy. And seeing this type of data, seeing the loss through attrition, seeing the loss through EAB or the Asian longhorn, and the ice storm that we've had, we've taken a hit. So I think our residents are demanding that we take a more proactive and more strict approach to our tree bylaw.
So you're okay with the tree bylaw now?
The present one I accept, but I do believe that there has to be changes. I like the fact that we're changing the definition, or contemplating that from 20 centimeter diameter to 15 or even 12. I appreciate that one of the things that we want to do is get rid of the notification process. Last year alone, I think we lost 865 trees through the notification process, and that's simply faxing a note in and saying that my tree is this diameter and I'm taking it down. And I also like the fact that we're thinking about compensation. One of the recommendations is that for every 10 centimeter of diameter that you lose, you need to plant another tree. So I think those are very proactive measures that I think they're going to bring us towards our 2057 goal.
Well, it's terrific to see your conversion on the point, and I have to say, you've been wonderful to work with on council, because you can take a position that might not be the same as the others, and we still remain collegial and we still work together constructively. Absolutely. I love that about our council. Councillor Robinson.
Mayor Worship, whatever you want to be called. One of the things that we need to change, in my opinion, or certainly need to look at, and I think we'll hear more about this with respect to the private bylaw, the private tree bylaw, is the current ability for a homeowner to remove 4 trees a year without permission from his backyard, up to 76 centimeters. And I believe that that is wrong. I think that needs to be changed. That may give that homeowner the ability to remove those trees, but with a permit, but with approval. Now they can do it carte blanche for a year, no permit required. All they got to do is tell the town they did it.
Right.
After they did it.
So in the proposed new tree bylaw, we're changing that. Are you?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what
you're good with that.
We need. Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Elgar?
I want to hear from the people. We're very early in the process. It just got approved by council a week ago of where we're going. And that's where I want to hear the public speak out on this issue and get back to us to see whether we're strong enough, whether we should do more. There's a lot more smarter people than me out there in Oakville, of the 185,000 people who understand it and have got all the science behind it. So I'm really looking forward to the feedback we're going to get from residents.
Just say that again. There's a lot more smarter people than you.
Oh, for sure.
I heard that before.
Not about trees.
Not about trees.
Well, now, let's just clear one thing up. Council hasn't approved it. What Council approved was to go out to the public for consultation.
Yes.
And one of the things I'm the proudest of the way we work together as a council is the way we go for extra consultation. I think we all believe that we make better decisions when we get as much of the town involved as we can. And you're not arguing with me on that, are you?
No, I think this council, under your leadership, has always been an evidence-based approach, and that's why I'm saying I'm glad that we received the data. And the same thing that we're doing now with the Burton lands, getting the data, getting the evidence, and then deciding what we're going to do. And those decisions withstand a lot of judicial scrutiny. So I'm very impressed with the way that we're going about saving the Burton lands.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful that the methods that I'm outlining will get us to 100% success.
Rob, should we announce the dates of the two meetings?
I think it'd be good for you to do that.
April 23rd at QEP CCC, 7 to 9 p.m., and April 24th, the next night, at Town Hall from 7 to 9.
So now, are you going to be there?
I'll be at one of them.
Have you decided which one?
I have an idea. Maybe at QE.
You should tell your fans. So QE, well, that's in your ward. Councillor Elgar, are you going to be at both of them?
Absolutely.
Councillor Khan?
As will I.
Now, what's your sense of the rest of council on our issue here? Any opposition? You know, Councillor Khan was not the only one who voted against it when we did it, and we've welcomed his conversion. There was other opposition. Do you think we'll have a full conversion of the entire council? Alan, what do you think?
I absolutely believe what council has learned over the last 4 or 5 years since we introduced the tree bylaw, that we need the tree bylaw and we need to tighten it up. So I think it'll be unanimous.
Well, that's a pretty good final word from Councillor Elgar, and I thank you for joining us today to see how council matters.